there should be one left or two out there. I've got one up here, actually. And we're thinking about what we resist persists. What we resist persists. If you have your Bible with you, let's turn to Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5. We're going to just kind of get into the midst of the Sermon on the Mount, as it's commonly known. Jesus did a very similar series of teachings in Luke's Gospel, probably two different times. This one is on the Mount. The other one sometimes is called the Sermon on the Plain. Similar situation, similar teaching, but we're looking at just one verse tonight. And also, if you want to make a note, but we'll mention it later in closing, there's another, I would say, parallel passage with one little difference in Romans chapter 12, verse 21. So Paul, Matthew tonight, 5:39, right in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. Well, we better actually look at verse 38 too, technically. This is Jesus again speaking to the disciples, to also the multitudes at this point. You have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that you resist not evil, but whoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. We've just finished a television series that seems to be done for a little while. Another, I think, final. I think it's the final season, will come up later this year, but one episode close to the finale of the one we've been watching, it was quite interesting to me. A lady who is related to the star of the program is asking this physician if he has solved the problem that he needed to solve. And he kind of skates a little bit and kind of, avoids a direct confrontation. And she said something. As soon as she said it, it hit me. Now, there's a sermon there. God talks to us all the time, but we don't always listen. And he talks to us in ways that we understand. I'm interested in television, interested in the movie business and fiction and so on. So often he'll speak to me that way. And this man's aunt, who was also a physician, said to him, what we resist persists. And I thought, wow, what we resist persists. So it kind of hit me that if we don't deal correctly with even a problem area, it won't go away. My dad used to say, don't put off to tomorrow what you should have done yesterday. So there's a truth there that we need to meet even awkward situations, awkward people immediately, because if we don't, it's not going to go away. It's just going to continue. And I find this beautifully put in the words of Jesus, which we're going to look at tonight, the principle that he sets forth here that is very practical. And then the practice, how do we work it out? I mentioned already that this verse, these two verses, appear in the Sermon on the Mount. And what the Sermon on the Mount does basically is contrast our Lord's principles and precepts with the Old Testament law. And you see this, and many of us have read it numerous times. You see this over and over. You have heard, or it was said, but, and he always uses the word Allah, which is an adversative. But I, in contrast to that, say. So he's not just giving another way of looking at it or another take on it, but he's saying in contrast to that, here's the truth. And what he's really doing is contrasting the Old Testament law with New Testament grace. And he does it repeatedly in every kind of sphere that you and I live in. In this context, he's weighing in on interpersonal relationships and how to successfully deal with them in a way that benefits both people rather than causing problems. So again, verse 38 says, you have heard that it was said, eye instead of eye, tooth instead of tooth. In actual fact, though, the immediate circumstances of the day show us that what Jesus was saying was an improvement, but even the law as it was back then was an improvement when you compare the nation of Israel to the nations round about them. I remember when I was a little boy in grade school, we had a visiting priest, and for whatever reason, he would guest teach different classes. And I forget which class this was, probably religion. This came up. And I remember him saying, the Old Testament law is often denigrated. People point their finger at it. Ah, what a wrathful God, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. What a horrible situation. What a way to live. But he said, in actual fact, that was grace compared to other nations. For another nation, you knock someone's tooth out, you lose your head. I mean, they would go above and beyond. So when the law did this, it was an even playing field. And it was actually very beneficial for the day. It kind of provided a modicum of fairness and restraint. But here we are. Here's what Jesus is advocating, even a step beyond that, which was an improvement against the pagans. Here's his principle. But he often does this, he'll use a personal pronoun for emphasis. People there would hear it. Oh, he's saying, I'm in contrast to that. You often hear him saying, you read in your law or Moses' law, not mine. See, his whole life, his whole teaching, his whole person is grace. It's different. So he says it here, ego. But I am saying unto you to resist not the evil. And this is helpful because the word evil, resist, evil rather, it could be either masculine, so a person problem, or it could be neuter. It could be a philosophy problem. It could be a governmental situation or some kind of problem on the job, maybe a way of doing things that comes down from the higher-ups type thing. It could be either a person or a principle. The word comes from poneros, which means just that, evil. You read often in the New Testament, when a demon is cast out, the scripture will say, to pneuma, tu poneru, the spirit, the evil one. Satan is called poneros. He's called the evil one. And so Jesus is saying, this principle can be applied to individual human persons or even abstract principles, as I mentioned, like philosophies or governments. I'm saying to you, resist not the evil. Don't worry about, he knocked my tooth out, I'll knock his out. I won't do worse than that, but I'll get a tooth from my tooth. He punched me in the eye, I'll punch him in the other eye. At least we'll be even. He's saying go beyond that. Don't resist what the person's doing at all. Also interesting to notice this. He's not saying stop resisting evil. We'll get there in a minute. Well, a couple minutes. Paul says that later. But Jesus is not talking about, hey, quit this habit you have of always returning negative with negative. He's not saying that. He's saying don't do it. Or forewarned is forearmed. I mean, if you think about it with me tonight, isn't it easier to prevent a lawsuit than to count on winning in a court battle? You may not. Wouldn't it be the better part of wisdom not to get there in the first place, to settle out of court so that both parties remain unharmed? And to have that concept that Jesus is talking about in mind is a prevention rather than a cure. I've probably said this 100 million times, but it comes to my mind again. When I was doing martial arts with one of the later martial arts I studied, I asked the teacher, I said, well, this is really good stuff. I was really enjoying it. And I said, but, it still, to me, comes back to this question. What about the fear factor? It's one thing to study martial arts, but it's another thing to be in a confrontation. What do you do with the fear that is just a natural response to someone coming against you? And he said, are you nervous when you're preaching or teaching? I said, no. He said, are you sure? I said, no, not at all. Why? He said, why aren't you nervous? Why aren't you anxious before you preach. And I said to him, well, I already know what I'm going to say. I've already studied it. I have notes. I know what I'm dealing with. I know what scriptures. And so he said, well, it's the same way with martial arts. He said, if you already know what you're going to do if somebody attacks you, it's not so important, the emotion. You don't so much have that. We call it muscle memory or whatever. Once that's really in you, martial arts are not like, it's not like a coat you take off and put on. It's something that's always in you. They've actually done studies on this, although we're not teaching about martial arts, but we are in a sense. They've actually done studies on this, that a person who has studied martial arts, or especially if somebody's proficient in it, they actually carry themselves differently than someone who's not. You've probably heard people say, he's prey, or she's prey. In other words, they have a lack of confidence in their attitude, whereas someone that has studied martial arts or maybe is carrying a weapon has a different attitude, a different affect. It changes everything about you because you kind of know what you're going to do if you're ever put in a situation that becomes awkward. So think about this in terms of life. Think of life for a moment as a raging sea or ocean, wave after wave coming in. Now, none of us could do this, but let's suppose we had a real big broom and we took this attitude, you know what, bless God, I'm going to go down there and see who's really boss, the wave or me. And we put the big broom down on the sand, and when that wave comes in, we start pushing against it. What will happen? That wave will just get stirred up more, right? It has to. Force meets force, and that's what happens. We get pushed back, and it'll just increase the intensity. But turn that around a little bit. What if we decided, I'm going to go out into the ocean a ways? I wouldn't do it, but some people might go out into the ocean a ways, and instead of pushing the waves back, I'm going to change my attitude and go with the flow. Instead of resisting, the longer I resist, the greater it persists. It's not going to back up and go away. It's going to keep coming. And if I push, it's going to get worse, right? What if I decide to, quote unquote, go with the flow? I am not increasing the problem. As a matter of fact, I might find a way to actually have some fun. Do you know some people do this? It's called surfing. I wouldn't do it, but there are people that just love to get out in the ocean. They love the waves. They wait for the biggest one or the one that they really got their heart set on. And what do? Fight it? No, they turn around and they go the same way as the wave, and it's fun. What might put somebody else in a panic puts them in a place of delight. So this is the psychological principle here. Dr. Claire Weeks, in many of her wonderful books, talks about this in terms of things that come against us, whether it's a person getting in our face or a situation we didn't expect, an unforeseen circumstance comes our way, we're not prepared for it. And she said normally we go into a panic. We go into flight, fight, or freeze, right? And it's beautiful what she says. It seems like, wow, this is overwhelming. Oh gosh, I lost my wallet. And your heart's pumping through your chest, or your phone. Nowadays, your phone. I have a very, very, very close friend, my best friend, who misplaced his phone. And his first response was, oh, wow. Oh, now what? Because a lot of his life was in that phone, right? And Dr. Weeks points out, while that happens, there's actually a second fear. It's a second fear. They come so quickly together, it seems like they're one, but they're not. The first is the problem. I've misplaced my wallet. Boom. That triggers the fight or flight response. We have nothing to do with that. We can't control it. It's part of the autonomic nervous system. Isn't that a beautiful word? That's Greek. About 1 or 2 out of every 5 English words is Greek. Auto means self, and nomos means law. So that nervous system, that nervous organization, is a law unto itself. We can't do anything about it. We can't start it. We can't stop it. But then, let's say after the shock, my wallet's gone. Then, oh my gosh, what if? And that starts another wave. They happen so close together, we usually think they're one, but they're not. We can't control the first, but we can control the second. How do we do that? One good way is to face it, but don't fight it. Accept it. If you're on the shore, you let the wave pass over you rather than pushing against it and stirring it up more. This is the same thing with people problems. It's the same thing with philosophies or governmental difficulties. Anything you can think of that can become awkward in your life or mine works the same way. Now, we've looked at the principle. Let's look at the practice Jesus is talking about. It's really interesting to look closely at what he's saying here. He's not advocating doing nothing. Stop resisting. He doesn't say, resist not the evil person or the evil thing and leave it there. No such thing as a vacuum, right? He said, but instead, but rather in contrast to that, and he continues with an alternative. But rather in contrast to that, whosoever is striking you on your cheek, the right one, turn to him the other also. Now, when we look at that, we normally think of it like this. Oh, he's telling us to suffer in silence and don't take the situation into my own hands. That guy's fixing to hit me. Just let him hit me. And as a matter of fact, turn the other way and let him get the other side too. So I have a match set. I have a shiner here. I don't want my left cheek to be jealous. So I'll shift and let him let go there too. But I would like to offer another perspective on this. That word also jumped out at me, but turn to him the other cheek also. I thought that was interesting. So let's look at it this way. There's a principle in the most recent martial art that I studied and thankfully received a teacher certificate in. One of the principles of Aikijitsu means, the word translates to the art of unity with spirit. The art of unity with spirit. Rather than fighting something, you endeavor to blend with it. One of the precepts of it is don't meet force with force. Another one is lower the apex, or do what you can to get the person's head lowered. And the third precept is circular motion rather than linear motion, circular motion, right? So think of it like this. What if we apply this concept of Aiki to what Jesus is saying here? As the strike is coming, right, we turn. So if it's my right cheek, let's assume that the man is, I guess, right-handed. He would be doing a backhand strike. Or if he's left-handed, it would be coming this way. In either case, while he's striking me, what if I turn? He will go past, right? And then I will show him the other side. It's interesting that this word turn, actually it translates strepso. And strepso means to turn around, or pivot. What a beautiful picture. So someone's trying to punch me, and I don't do anything other than not be there. And he will go on his merry way. And when you really think about this, if you study it or if you read after it sometime, you'll find that one of the most philosophical type arts there are, the concept was that you get the opponent so frustrated that he quits. I mean, if they're coming at you very hard and all you do is pivot and they sail on through or trip or fall and they get up and you turn the other cheek and they come again and you pivot again and they go the other way, the idea is hopefully they'll realize, hey, I'm coming out on the short end here. And then, of course, there are counter things you can do too. But I think Jesus himself actually did this. You read several places in the New Testament, they were fixing to cancel his ticket, and he disappeared from their midst. He did not resist the evil. He did not come against them. They came at him, and he just exited from their midst. Think about this in terms of natural human behavior. This is the way things work. Someone comes against us, the first natural reaction is to get right in their face, meet force with force rather than not. We don't yield. We don't pivot away and simply let their aggression not meet its target and not be returned. And we avoid all the negative behavior. I remember many years ago, decades ago, I had a dream, and in the dream, I was right in the drink, and I'm not a swimmer. Barb taught me how to float. I can float, maybe, a little bit, but I'm not a swimmer. I could probably swim a little to save my life, but I'm not into it. And I had this dream, and naturally, I'm in the middle of the drink, and the waves are going here, there, and everywhere, and I'm flailing, and then I heard this voice. Say, relax. And I'm thinking, relax? How can you relax when your life's fixing to end, But it was, relax. So in the dream, I just relaxed, and my feet and legs came up as I relaxed. And the next thing I knew, I was floating. Just almost kind of a half-baked surf. I was going with the water rather than fighting and flailing. And it was the nicest thing. And as the dream went on, it was like, in movie terms, it was like it went from a close-up to a long shot. And I could see myself, little me, from a distance, just going down the river. Not going down, but just enjoying the ride. And I woke up. And that stayed with me. And I try to remember that, and I apply it psychologically. I hope you will too, spiritually. Because normally our enemies are not physical foes. Normally they're not. Normally they're spiritual or mental or emotional, and sometimes they can be as bad or worse. Just getting a bad medical report. Has anybody ever had one of those? Just me? They're not fun. Your first reaction is, and then, quick as a bunny, second fear comes in. Oh my God, what if I have this? Oh, I heard this leads to, and then you're really off and running. And that's just normal. That's called a bad case of fallen human nature. But it was really beautiful in the dream to think, well, I'll relax, and instead of fighting the river, I'll let the river take me. And so, the same thing in real life. Sometimes, with an awkward person, for example, especially if they're verbally awkward, a really nice thing to do, rather than resist them, you called me what? Well, how dare you? And you called him that. He says the mean remark or whatever. Don't respond at all. Don't respond. Sometimes silence is golden. Don't say a word. I've done this over the years. Sometimes it's amazing to watch the result. Because what happens is the person's words are left out there, and they just echo and reverberate, and he or she can hear what they said, and they're dying 1,000 deaths because they're thinking, oh gosh, I should have never said that. What an idiot. I sound like a real nut job, and you don't have to say anything. Another way is to, you say, but I want to say something. Well, why don't you try this? Don't say it out loud, but just inwardly say, I have nothing to say to that. Try that sometime. Somebody really gets in your face. They really, quote unquote, push your buttons, and just inwardly, I have nothing to say to that. So just let it go. Go with the flow. Let the water wash over you. Pivot. Never meet force with force. Circular motion. Even physically leaving, like I said, works. Jesus did that. They came to him, and he just disappeared into their midst. You've heard today, I'm sure, even in the secular world, time out. Time out. If you're married to an idiot, and there are plenty of them out there, and prone to verbal abuse or, God forbid, physical abuse, you remove yourself from the situation. Just take a time out. Go somewhere else. I don't know whether you realize this or not, but not every woman is a joy to live with. Nobody watching this believes me. There's one or two that are not always a joy to be around. Solomon seemed to know that because he wrote twice, it's better to be in the corner of a housetop than with an angry and aggravating woman. Another verse that the same man wrote at Solomon. You know what? With 1,000 wives, he must have learned something by accident with all those women. Anyway, he says also, it's better to be in a wilderness than with an angry and contentious woman. Now, see, all the men are doing this right now. See? If we could just get you lot sorted, our lives will be great. You're the problem. Wait a minute. The same guy, Solomon, said, be not in the presence of an angry man. Why? Lest you learn his ways and suffer harm, right? We sometimes pick up the wrong things from being around the wrong people. I heard one world-class minister say it like this. Wrong things stop happening when the wrong people leave our lives. And he pointed to Jonah. Remember what happened? The Lord was not happy that Jonah wanted to ignore his draft notice. He said, go to Nineveh. And Jonah said, you know what? I think I've got a better idea. I'm going to go to the opposite direction to Tarshish. So he booked a boat. Off he went. And there go the waves. And the Bible says, after they chucked him overboard, there was a great calm. And this preacher said, there's a picture of it right there. You get the wrong person out of your life, the wrong things stop happening. But, I mean, it's kind of important. Are we all seeing the same truth here? Yeah. It's so practical. Everything Jesus says is practical. And again, whether I'm not advocating that he followed martial arts. If he did, I think I know which one it would be. But still, I think he's advocating this concept of not returning force with force, not ignoring it either, but certainly not resisting it. What we resist persists. The more you push back, the more you stir it up. The more you learn to remove yourself one way or another, psychologically or perhaps physically, it'll die down. A lot of times, whether we're the idiot or the other person is, sometimes it's both, if we just have time, to sort of be on our own, we'll come to common sense. It's in there. Sometimes we just need a few moments to have it start to resonate again. And finishing tonight, I want to just, if you have it, you can look at it with me. I'll paraphrase it. In the New Testament, farther along in Romans chapter 12, Paul basically offers the advice that Jesus had given in the Sermon on the Mount with one little tweak. Jesus said, don't resist the evil person or the evil thing. Don't do it. Forewarned, forearmed. You're not in trouble now. Don't get in trouble. Paul said it differently. He said, stop being overcome by the evil. And the overcome word there is beautiful. It comes from the word Nike. Nike was the goddess of war. And Nike was supposedly able to let you win a battle. She also gave gifts of prosperity and peace and wholeness and so on. So the goddess Nike was highly revered by the Greeks. And Paul uses a verb made of her name. First of all, he says, stop being overcome, Nico. Stop being overcome by the evil thing, but rather overcome, Nika, but rather overcome the evil with the good. Again, no vacuum, no empty space. It's not you just don't do this, you do something else. Anybody have a clue what that could be? To overcome the evil thing or person? I want to suggest praise and prayer. Prayer and praise. Prayer and praise. Rather than returning trouble for trouble, pivot. Turn, let it pass. Don't meet force with force. Rather, overcome the evil person or thing with spiritual means. Someone has said it like this: one way to get rid of an enemy is to make him your friend or make her your friend. And that absolutely works and absolutely does happen. I could tell you, if we had a lot of time, I could tell you time after time in counseling, I've heard of this, where a person took the attitude that they weren't going to resist evil because what we resist persists, but they decided to overcome the evil with good, not returning trouble in kind, but returning good in the place of it. And sometimes it can be praying for the person, praying for the situation. They don't even know what you're doing. But they find themselves thinking differently. They find themselves reading books they wouldn't ordinarily read. And they think it's a coincidence. It's actually God working in response to our prayers. The other thing, as I said, is praise. I'm a slow study. I really am, but I'm learning. I'm getting there slowly. When bad things happen, after the initial shock that we don't have any control over, after the initial fear of the person or the problem or the situation or the circumstance, after that hits, to step back. Oh, wow. Just turn, let it pass, and then say, Lord, what is the alternative outcome to this that you've already put together? And then, thank you, Lord. I don't know how in the world, when my close friend lost his phone, within minutes he was praying, thanking God that everything was okay, the phone was going to turn up. You know what? It was less than just a couple of hours. He was literally led to the person that had the phone. No problems, no difficulties. And so he had yet another example of, this thing really works. So I just thought it would be very helpful for us to think about this. And it's very easy to apply. You'll probably have an opportunity before you get home tonight to apply this. Someone will happen to you or something will happen to you. Just, try to remember, I can't pretend this isn't happening. I can't fight it. What I resist is just going to persist. Is there another way? And Jesus is suggesting yes. If he's striking you, it's present tense, hasn't necessarily hit yet. If he's striking you on the right cheek, just pivot, turn to him the other also. And in a perfect world, he'll eventually get discouraged and frustrated and think about what he or she's doing and hopefully choose a better path.
That's profound. I'll tell you something.
He's good, isn't he?
I'm sitting here listening to you.
The Lord's good.
If you just figure this out today,
Yeah.
or you've been working on it your whole life, and it works. I've seen it work over and over. It goes against all my physical
Yes.
will, and it doesn't go along with being John Wayne.
Right. Yep. Yep.
I'll give you a little example.
Sure.
I hate to even tell you. It was like this has been 38 years ago. I got behind I would sell stuff and I got behind on sales tax. And I filed it and stuff, I just never paid it. So,
yeah.
But then we moved out of Ohio to California. In Colorado, we were gone for 2 or 3 years. Then I came back to Ohio. And then I forgot all about it. The sales tax was about $20,000. And all of a sudden the phone rang. And it's this guy named, it was a weird name, like Horse or something like that. And he says, you owe this money, This guy was relentless.
Sure.
This guy was the best I've ever seen. This guy, and I didn't have that much money right then,
Yeah.
And this guy, and I said, okay, yeah. And I couldn't, this went on for like a year or two.
Wow.
I had the police come and look at me and look what we had in case they needed to take it all. And they never did find my bank, Yeah, I don't know why. But and then I got this attorney that I had gone to, that he had came to me before when I had trouble with taxes, and he was wanting to collect from me, so I thought he'd be a good guy to get. So I did, and it didn't work out. They were cussing each other out. But then there's a thing in AA where you pray for that person.
Yeah. I
started praying. This guy that was trying to get me out of Columbus, I was hoping that his car would blow up in 10 minutes. It was that, they literally drug me through the mill. And all of a sudden, listen to this, I started praying for the guy. I said, God help this guy. On my knees praying. Within 2 weeks, they took a settlement and it was taken care of.
Wow.
God did it.
Sure.
It's such a miracle. And why is it so hard? I don't know. Because of ego, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
Because if I go out and just surrender, But yet at the same time, it's like a two-edged sword, because I still have to operate, I still have to do stuff. But I gotta have it with the attitude that I'm really not in charge.
Amen.
And when I do that, things happen.
Yeah.
It's a miracle,
Yeah.
and I wish I could remember it constantly.
Yeah.
But it's hard, because
Yeah.
it's a world out there.
Yes.
You know?
That's right.
But all that's taken care of.
That's excellent. Excellent example. It's perfect.
Yeah, it works.
Prayer and praise instead of fighting back. Yeah, Solomon.
When you ask, what can we do instead of evil or whatever, I immediately thought, I don't know if you mentioned this earlier in Romans, that same chapter. He says, "Bless those who persecute you. Bless and don't curse."
Yeah.
So it's like the
Same.
exact opposite.
Exactly what Bill was saying. Yeah. Pray for them, bless. Yeah. Jesus said the same thing. Pray for your enemies, those who despitefully use you, and so on. Yeah.
I like how he says, "Bless and don't curse," as though it's tempting to want to respond in kind.
Cursing's a default.
And he knows that.
Yeah.
Don't do the usual.
Yeah. Right.
But bless.
That's right. To me, it's beautiful because most Christians don't like that the flesh is the default. They want to think we're in the spirit. Once in a while we go in the flesh. No. Paul said, walk in the spirit and you won't fulfill the desire of the flesh. So the spirit has to cut off what we would normally do. Even as believers, we still have the lower nature, and we're going to have it till we get a new body. You had something more? No?
Yeah.
Okay. If it comes back, just wait.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I was thinking, what about, this word resist?
Yeah.
It just keeps,
Yeah.
it says resist the devil and he'll
Yeah.
flee from you.
Yes.
And later, another place says, who resist?
Mm-hmm.
And then it dawned on me, that's not a person.
Mm.
That's not someone persecuting you.
That's true too.
And then the whole truth of the weapons of our warfare
Yeah,
are
true.
not carnal.
Yeah.
And we battle not against flesh and blood.
Right.
We're supposed to bless the flesh and blood.
Yeah.
Battle against
The spirit's behind it.
them.
Yeah. Yep.
So the original concept I always understood, and I guess a lot of Christians always understood, you're supposed to let a person like punch you on this side and then offer on the other, she's going to punch you on the other side as well.
Right. Yeah.
So the clarification is you're supposed to just kind of get out of the way.
Yeah, that's my take on it. I think it's at least another way of looking at it. Now, some people say that this is, if it's in the context of persecution for the faith, not just an angry neighbor. And I can see a truth there. If you're being persecuted for the faith, that you would not fight back because you're not defending yourself. But this, I think it's broader, what Jesus is saying here. I think this is more the secular thing, the angry neighbor, And so I think there's a couple of different ways of looking at it. I'm just suggesting, is when I saw that, turn the other cheek also. The idea is you've already turned something. He hasn't hit you yet, he's going to. You turn. And turn the other also. In other words, go with the flow, get out of the way if you can. And Jesus actually said that even with persecution, if they persecute you in one city, what? Picket. March. Have a demonstration. What did he say? Leave and go somewhere else. You don't resist evil. If they don't like you here, then move on. What song?
It just reminded me of Jesus' kind of two examples of being persecuted for the faith, and kind of both things that we're supposed to do. Is sometimes when he was persecuted, he disappeared in the midst of them.
Right.
In the midst of them.
Right.
And knew it wasn't his time yet to
Right.
actually suffer. But then when he knew it was his time, he allowed it to happen.
Yes.
He went to the cross. But
Once again, being led by the Spirit.
same with us.
There's no one size fits all.
Sometimes we escape to another city, and then maybe sometimes
We don't. Right.
Or it never supposed to get back.
Yeah.
One other thing, I used to meditate a lot,
Mm.
and I just, Thy will be done, Jesus. And you get into almost another dimension out there,
Yep.
everything gets real thin. And I would get in situations where something was really upsetting me. It could be family, it could be financial, it could be, and I would go meditate for maybe a half an hour, and then get back up. And it was like, the people got better. The people I was mad at got better all day. Your attitude is what's messed up, and you can't see it, you know? You're looking in the mirror and not realizing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
It's unbelievable.
It's awesome.
I think, well, they sure got it.
Wonder why they changed so much.
And it can affect other areas
Yeah.
of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when I'm in my office, if I have a prayer time, as you say, meditate, you know, and I will do that. And 20 minutes, maybe a half hour, and I open my eyes and the room's brighter.
Right.
Something really does happen, but it's in here. Yeah,
It's
changes.
spiritual.
It is. And it's so easy, and I've actually taught, you know, sort of a way to meditate. It's very
But
simple.
sometimes it's hard to make yourself do it.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I want to be mean.
yeah. And then you give it this. Richard Lewis, you know, what was I, why didn't I? But sooner or later we get it.
Yeah.
We're going to come around the Lord's table, and if you can, make sure try to be here Sunday.
Gosh, I was talking to Shar. I'm hoping it's going to help somebody, help a lot of people. We're going to talk about the silent killer this week, and you'd be amazed. It's not high blood pressure. We'll talk about that, but it's spiritual, the spiritual silent killer, and well, you get a handle on that. As we look at what we're going to look at, it's like there's going to be a lot of or aha moments, and I'm believing for that, because if you have it, you get it, and you can keep going back to it. You think, oh, wow, your life will change. I know mine does all the time. It's like, I feel like you, Bill. I don't remember. That's the problem. I forget some of these things. But that's the human condition. But we can be brought up back to where we need to